Pittsburgh Steelers fans, what is up? My name is Bryan Anthony Davis. The guy waving vociferously at the bottom is Tony Defeo, and if this is audio only, Tony is waving, and since you can't see it, he's got an American flag, he's got fireworks, he is all decked out for July 4th. No, he's not, but he's got the Pirates hat on, which he's repping the Buccos, and speaking of
Bucks.
Speaking of America, you've got a guy wearing an Iron Man shirt, and there's nothing more American than Marvel. Is Captain America on that shirt somewhere?
Yes.
Is he in the bottom there? Okay, yeah.
I didn't even notice that. Oh, that's a great shirt. You know, if I may interject, one of my favorite stories I ever wrote for the fan post side, because if I put it on the regular post or regular page, I'd probably get fired, was the one called the Incredible Hulk breaks the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I based it on the TV show. So it's one of my favorite things I ever wrote. So that reminds me, I'm a big fan. That's a great shirt, Shannon. Sorry to interrupt.
The Hawks are my favorite. So
wow.
I agree with you. Yes.
Okay, I've got to find that. I am a Captain America guy. My son is he's definitely a Tony Stark Iron Man guy, but I like them all. I've become a Marvel fan in the last couple of years. Love me some Ant-Man. That's just some good stuff there. But I got to tell you, Thor's coming out this weekend, and I'm looking forward to the new Thor. They're humorous to me too, so it's good stuff. But I never mentioned his name, so because Tony interjected, and I do want to check out that article. But Tony, his name is Shannon White, and Shannon White is with us as always. Gosh, I'm not sure the exact date, but I think this has been a year of Shannon with Tony and Bryan on Mondays on the Hangover. And so if it's not exactly a year to the date, happy anniversary, Shannon. Just gonna say thank you. A great addition to the show. And I'm looking at the comments the other day. They're and I'm seeing comments for the curtain call. And they're like, hey, this is our favorite show. This is the best show on BTSC. So, and then somebody else wrote, love Shannon. So, I mean, I love to hear that. If you have not caught Shannon and Jeffrey Benedict on the curtain call, fantastic show. It's going to turn back into Know Your Enemy once we get into the season. And Know Your Enemy is probably one of my favorite shows on the network, not because I came up with the idea for Know Your Enemy, because it used to be my article. I used to write an article called Know Your Enemy just because I like the song by Green Day. Love me some Green Day. But they talk every single week to somebody that is repping the opposition. So that's something that you'll have to look out for in just a few weeks. I mean, that's the season's coming up, and we're going to be in camp in 22 days, fellas.
Crazy.
I tell you what, and BTSC is going to have everything for you, so make sure you check that out. Guys, we're excited for camp, but we've got to talk about first, today being July 4th, and I wish everybody a safe and happy holiday. I've read some stuff today going around the nation that thoughts and prayers going out to the people in Illinois, that tragedy at a parade. Absolutely devastating. And I just want y'all to remember why we celebrate this day and celebrate our independence. But remember, when you have independence and you have freedom, remember to protect the freedom of others as well. And that's one of the things that we were protecting on July 4th, 1776. On our nation's birthday. So let's get started. Gentlemen, camp is upon us. And hey, I could ask you the questions that we've been talking about for a long time. What should we expect for training camp? Who's going to be a surprise? What's going to happen with the defense? Is it going to be a juggernaut now that Brian Flores is there? Who's going to be starting at quarterback? We could talk about all of that stuff. And that's stuff that we've talked about and we're going to continue to talk about. And we're going to get a refresh once we get to camp. That's going to be really cool. We're going to have all kinds of new stories to be talking about. The question I want to ask you before we get into the topic of the show, do you expect any surprises in the next 3 weeks and 1 day. Shannon, I'm going to start with you.
I hope not. Because that's this time of year, I think they're pretty much set with the roster that they're going to go into camp with at least, and then see how the guys look, at actual camp, and that'll show if they have a position that they really think they need a free agents or a trade. But yeah, I don't want to hear about any arrest or anything like that. So I don't want any surprises between now and camp.
Tony, what is up?
Not a whole lot. Just enjoying the AC. It's really hot outside. It's great. I'm happy 4th to everybody out there. As far as any surprises, I don't really see any. I mean, I know people keep beating that left tackle drum, the left and right tackle drum, so that you might see some. It wouldn't surprise me the way they've operated the last few years. But I think they're going to wait, like Shannon said, kind of see what they have once they get to camp, and then maybe make some decisions after that.
Yeah, Tony, I want to talk about what you just said there, and it's very true what you just said, but they have reacted the last couple years, and they've reacted because of David DeCastro's release, and then also day before they got started going into camp, that was a reaction because Vinny Williams retired right before they start camp. So Melvin Ingram III was brought in as a reaction, and I still think that was a good signing. Did it work out? No, because there was because really I don't think they had time to set the expectations, and the player had different expectations than the organization.
Right.
And I understand that. I am not going to go ahead and pin blame for that not working out. Hey, go ahead and take a look at Connor Hayward. If you like Connor Hayward, he's the guy they got in that trade. And I don't think Melvin Ingram continuing to be here would have changed anything for the Steelers and the Steelers' fortunes going down the stretch. So, did that work out? No. Was that a good signing? Yeah, I thought that was a good signing as a reaction to Vince Williams. I also thought Trey Turner was a good signing as a reaction to David DeCastro.
Right.
And to me, I mean, was Trey Turner great for this organization? Absolutely not. Did Trey Turner fill a hole admirably? I think so. Some people will say no. But what happens if you don't have Trey Turner last year? It's even worse of a situation, I think, gentlemen. So not all signings are great signings, but imagine what happens if you don't make those signings. What could have happened with the whole Melvin Ingram III situation? That could have been an absolutely great signing if they were on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
If they were on the same page, maybe that ends up being great. But go ahead, Tony.
And what's so intriguing, or not even intriguing, but weird about that situation is he had such a large percentage of the snaps for a backup, and I realize a lot of it was due to injury, but he was also getting enough playing time even when both the starters were healthy. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, he was brought in here to be a backup. I mean, I think that's a slippery slope when you sign these veterans who have an impressive resume. They might come in and think secretly like, "Hey, I can beat this Alex Highsmith kid out. I'm going to do that." And I think that was Ingram's thing. So that's the only cautionary tale I think when it comes to, or one of them anyway, when it comes to signing somebody like that, who's sitting out there this late in the offseason.
Yeah, you need to go ahead and look at expectations. Shannon, we talked about the right tackle and left tackle situation. We talked about the fact that, that name Eric Fisher is out there. I think Eric Fisher is one of those guys that if you could bring in, he could do well. But do you think they worry about, the allocation of snaps and time when they approach a player like that, who is a Super Bowl champion, a former first overall pick? Do you think they worry about that, or they just roll the dice and bring a guy like that in if they decide to?
I think it's where they're such a young team. The whole face of the team has changed, not just with Ben leaving, but they're such a young franchise now. And I think that you have a guy with so much potential in Dan Moore Jr. based on what he did last year. I think you want to. He's got a full season under his belt. Now you want to see what can he do in year 2 after a full off season to work on his weaknesses, and that experience that he's got that he did not have last year. I expect him to take a really good step forward. Then with the new offense and the new requirements and the more mobile, where they're going to rely more on mobility and instead of just straight brute force, hopefully that will fit Okorafor's skill set much better. So, and he's only 24 years old. Even though he's played 4 years, he's such a talented young athlete. I think that they would be wise to stick with these 2 young guys, because the guys that are out there, let's say Fisher, if he's the best of the bunch, you kind of know what he can do, but is he going to be happy to come in and be a backup? You know, they went through that, like you said, with Ingram last year. So I expect them to go into it with and stick with Moore and Jukes.
Yes, and I agree with you on that. But if they decide to do that, Tony, is that a reactionary decision that needs to be done maybe 10 days after camp starts if they're not loving what is going on at the time?
I think at that point it would be, because you know, as Shannon said, you have, I mean, Dan Moore, he gained such valuable experience last year at left tackle. I mean, that's arguably the most important position on the offensive line, and he came in and he did fine. I don't know why more people aren't excited about the guy. I mean, in years past, that's a guy you'd be really excited about coming into a second year. So I think it'd be more reactionary. And you paid Shooks, you know, the money you paid him, and I realized they could get out of that contract after 1 year and not, you know, hurt themselves too much. But I think, 10 days into camp, that would be a reaction. I think I want to see what they have in these young guys. I'm perfectly fine with Joe Haig as the swing tackle. Maybe other people aren't, but I don't see Eric Fisher wanting to come in here and be the swing tackle or whatever. I think he'd want to come in here and start.
So I'm looking in the live chat right now, and I'm seeing Tate Boys, our buddy Tate Boys. If you have not checked out his show, I absolutely love We Run the North. It is a great show. He brings in different folks. He had Brandon Harriet, who's been a few times on the show, who represents Cincinnati, who I think he does a very good job in talking about the teams from the North. Tate Boys, Kevin Tate, one of the best. Just want to show out. He's agreeing with Shannon. So there you go. In fact, I think we are all agreeing with Shannon on this, but it is a reactionary thing if something happens. Also, another BTSCer that I am seeing in the live chat, our boy from down under, Marky D. So definitely say hello to Marky D, and a good friend of the shows, and you're going to hear more from him, State of the Steelers as well. So definitely I want to just show appreciation to our shows and the guys on our shows on our network that go and support our shows. So thank you so much for being in the live chat, gentlemen. So we brought up somebody, Dan Moore Jr. Would you say, and I'm going to start with you, Tony, on this one, would you say that Dan Moore Jr. going into his second year is not appreciated, whether it be by the team or by the fans, or maybe he's appreciated by the team because he's they have not brought another guy in, or maybe the fans keep on saying that, all right, a tackle, they don't have enough.
I think the team seems to be showing confidence in him because they, as you said, they didn't really draft anybody and they didn't bring in any kind of a high profile free agent. And you still have guys like Eric Fisher out there. As far as the fans, no, I don't think as a whole, I don't think the fans are on board with him. I think they're still calling for them to bring in other people. I saw, obviously Eric Fisher, that article was written by somebody last week. And I saw another one the other day about them making a trade for somebody, and that was very popular. So I think the fans are still, by and large, they're still concerned about the offensive line and namely the tackle position. And I think they still want to bring in they want them to bring in someone not just for depth, but to start. So I don't think they're as confident in Dan Moore as maybe I think they should be, and definitely not confident in Shooks. I don't think they're confident in him at all.
Shannon White, us as fans, are we just not? Do we, when a hole gets filled, and the Larry Ogunjobi signing filled a hole because we were not, a lot of fans weren't ready to go in with Chris Wormley full time because of the run stopping lack of ability that he has. So the team absolutely agreed and went and brought a guy in. So when that happens, do the fans just go and look and say, all right, where else could we have a problem? Not that there is a problem, but all right, we definitely need this guy. And I'm the guy who, there's a few of us screaming for another backup running back because I don't think that's adequate what the team has. So I go and I'm looking for a backup running back right now. But do you think that when the fans go ahead and see a position filled, then they immediately have to go and look for the next project, the next hole that needs to be filled? Shannon.
I think after the last 3 years, Steeler fans, we're passionate for anything. And we want to see the team perform up to what, if you're a younger fan, the only quarterback you maybe have ever known is Ben Roethlisberger. And if you're a fan, say, of our age group, we've went through ups and downs, but there's some things we've always counted on, and that'd be a tough defense and a strong running game. That's been a reputation for the longest time. Well, when you see a year like last year where you had the worst offensive line in the league and the worst defensive line as far as the run stopping, the worst run defense, I should say, in the NFL, you realize that those are the foundations of any successful team. So everybody has the best intentions. You want to see them rebuild their foundation. So I think that's why that after watching last year, nobody can say I'm comfortable with this offensive line. There has to be changes. And we've all seen the changes they made to the interior, and they've added talent, and hopefully they've really strengthened it because there was too much pressure coming up the middle, and they also couldn't open holes in the middle. But now, it's natural that we want to remember, it seems like the bad times stick in our mind. And we remember the games where Moore struggled, where he was barely, keeping Garrett from killing Ben, in under 2 seconds. But if you really were watching, he got better as the year went along. And that second time he went up against Garrett, he played much, much better. And so I think that people are just like, I remember last year, they might not have followed as closely in the offseason and realized that the Steelers have made a lot of improvement. And we want to see them, offensive line, defensive line, or as you say, backup running back. But I can't judge any of the skill position players based on the last year's offense because none of the running backs looked good other than Harris. And, he had to do Herculean things to be successful. So, the Steelers will have to decide if Benny Snell and McFarland and these undrafted guys, if they can be the answer. Because they really haven't had a fair opportunity, to be honest.
Tony, who do you feel is the most underappreciated on this team right now? Where did we just hit it? Is it Dan Moore Jr.? Or is there somebody else on this team that you feel does not get the appreciation that they deserve?
Well, I think you hit on it in the pre-production of the show. We were talking about off air, and that's Terrell Edmonds. I mean, look at how many people were clamoring for them to sign the Honey Badger back in the wintertime. And, I think Edmonds is a fine, young, solid player. So I think he's somebody that has never gotten his due here. We all know he was overdrafted. We all know he probably should have been drafted in the second or third round. And if he would have been drafted there, he would have been appreciated more. But, even having said that, he's still a fine, solid player, and he's not a liability. So I think he is definitely their most underappreciated player on the entire 53-man roster.
Shannon, what does Terrell Edmunds need to do to become a fan favorite or get more appreciation? Or does it even matter to Terrell Edmunds as long as the team continues to bring him on? I know he's on a one-year deal, but he's auditioning. He's auditioning for other teams, but he is mainly auditioning for the Pittsburgh Steelers for a permanent role here. What does this guy have to do, man?
Turnovers. Splash plays. I mean, if he would have made splash plays more frequently, the Steelers would have picked up the option and they wouldn't have been able to afford him. But because he doesn't, and he's just solid all around, solid teammate, solid, reliable, durable, he does everything but make splash plays. He's great in covering the tight end. Again, a real weakness for the team until he came on board. As Tony said, he's considered he was overdrafted. I think the guys picking in the first round starter like Edwards is, I don't consider that being overdrafted because there's a lot of first round selections that bomb, and not just quarterbacks. And so I think Edwards has been a solid player. And now this year, if he shows, he gets a few turnovers, whether it be forced fumbles, interceptions, I think the market might be there for him. But it's affected him, obviously, because he didn't have a big market this year in free agency, even though I think he's a really solid player. So I think he's more valuable to the Steelers than he was other teams.
Shannon, I want to ask you a follow-up on this. It took Honey Badger a long time to sign, too. And it seemed like safeties did not fly off the shelf right away. In other years, they do. So what was it about safeties this year that didn't get their acclaim? And now, after Minkah Fitzpatrick signs the big deal, you're seeing other teams approach their safeties and now getting ready to pay them and wanting to pay them more.
Yeah, I think a lot of people was waiting. They wanted to have they didn't want to be the one to set the market. Like this offseason, the Jacksonville Jaguars set the new wide receiver market, and they set it high because, they overpaid for some guys, and nobody wanted to do that as safety. And now that, Honey Badger signed, and like, as you said, Fitzpatrick, now you're seeing other teams saying, okay, we got a baseline, now we'll lock these guys up. But a safety like Fitzpatrick, we know what his value is. And when Edwards is such a good running mate and a partner for Fitzpatrick, there's absolutely no way the Steelers should have got him at the price they got him. It was almost insulting. Yeah. I feel sorry for him because he's worth more than that.
Tony, the Steelers also on draft day, and this was an under-the-radar signing because right after they made their 7th pick, they announced that they were going to be signing Damontae Kazee, or at least Kazee's agent announced it. And they didn't really announce that signing until Monday, but they made that move. And by bringing in a guy like Damontae Kazee, do you think that is a slight to a guy like Terrell Edmunds, or are you more like Coach KT Smith, who loves the idea of the fact that this team might use 3 safety sets?
Honestly, based on the way Kevin Colbert didn't exactly give Edmunds a ringing endorsement during the offseason when he talked about him, and of course the figure that they signed him for, $2.5 million for a 1-year deal. I think that's a slight, and I think it's an indication that they're not happy with the strong safety position, and they feel like they can get better there, and maybe if not with Edmunds, with somebody else. I think they're still searching for an upgrade, and I don't think they feel at this point that Edmunds is the answer. Which again, like Shannon said, it's like I can't believe usually the way these teams operate in free agency, the NFL. I mean, they overpay for everybody, just about, except for in 2021 because of the cap issues with the pandemic. But this year, everything was back to normal. And a guy like that, a solid young guy who contributes in ways that people don't realize, like Shannon always points out, covering the tight end, which was a major weakness for them for so many years. And the fact that he didn't get a solid starting multi-year contract for a starter, it's just I just can't believe it. So I think Kazee is definitely somebody who's here to potentially take Edmonds' job, if not this year, then maybe after this year.
Oh, wow. Very interesting stuff there. The thing, and this is another one of the Bryan Anthony Davis questions that really can't be answered, but this guy's led the team in defensive snaps since he's been here.
Yeah.
And imagine if he's not in there. Imagine how tight ends could have torn this team up. Mark Andrews does well against the Steelers, but he didn't tear him up this year. Kelsey didn't really tear them up this year.
Right.
Kelsey's going to be Kelsey, but they held Kelsey a while before he made some big plays in both of those games. So, and I think a lot of that, comes down to the fact that Terrell Edmonds is really good, but he's not splashy like you both said, and that probably hurts him here. But I don't want to imagine life without him right now, because I think that defense needs a solid unsung hero, and I think it is Terrell Edmonds. So let's move on to the most underappreciated guys on the team, and we're also going to go through history. Guys that have been unsung heroes for this team that you just don't think of when you think of the Super Bowl champions as well. But somebody in the live chat brought this up, and it is Bob Yeager brought up Mason Rudolph. I think Mason Rudolph is probably the most underappreciated, because here's the thing: whether he is your starting quarterback or if he is your number two, he doesn't get the respect in any of those positions. And we saw him as a number two in 2019 be very solid. Then he got his world rocked by Earl Thomas and the Baltimore Ravens. And at the end of that season, when Duck Hodges started, let's just say it struck midnight on Duck Hodges, the Cinderella story, and everybody was clamoring for Mason Rudolph. And when he gets hurt, they're lamenting Mason Rudolph, but they sure don't appreciate him when he's healthy. Shannon, your thoughts on Mace?
My thoughts on Mace. I've said it all along, and I think that Rudolph can be a good backup quarterback. If he will ever embrace that, I think that he's the kind of guy that I think could come in off the bench and keep you in the game or get you. He's not a guy that's going to come in like Fitzpatrick was, Ryan Fitzpatrick. A gunslinger. That's not who Rudolph is. But I think he has excellent backup potential. Could have a lengthy career that way, kind of like Tommy Maddox. But he's not a franchise guy. So I don't know if that means he's underrated or those of us that see that. I wouldn't say he's underappreciated. I think it's more the reality of it. But one thing I will say real quick about Edmonds, the last thing is Edmonds is not good at his brand. Remember Juju and Clay, these guys that are good at selling themselves and their brand, and they focus on that. And Edmonds, he's just not like that. He's unassuming. He don't even celebrate after he makes a big tackle or a play. He's just very workmanlike. So I think that sometimes you got to toot your own horn to be heard, and that's not Edmonds. So I just wanted to put that in there.
But you know what? Minka doesn't really celebrate his brand. And that, I mean, I really don't think Minka has that much of a brand. Now, we know TJ does. TJ does celebration. And, TJ does endorsements. He has a brand, but he does it differently than Juju or Chase Claypool would do. And Chase Claypool's not even doing it as much as a lot of people think that they do. If you listen to Dave Schofield's podcast from a couple weeks back on the Stat Geek, very telling stuff on that. Very interesting to listen to. Actually, not Dave's, excuse me. That was Jeff Hartman's on Let's Ride. It was an excellent show. So that's one, go back in the archives and check out. But the thing about the thing that you said, and I agree with what you're saying, Shannon, but Pittsburgh's blue collar, and you would think that they're going to celebrate the blue collar guy that is Edmonds. But I think Tony hit it on the head, and it's a theory we've had a long time that if he was a second or third round draft pick, then then he's the guy that everybody loves. Back to Mason Rudolph. Here's a question for you guys. I'm going to ask this to both of you, but I'm going to start with Tony. The game I went to last year, freezing rain. It was a freezing rain day. It was against the Detroit Lions. Ben, in the last seconds of Saturday, test positive for COVID. He's out. Mason Rudolph is in. And sure, Mason gets first-team snaps on Wednesdays, but really wasn't involved in the game plan that week leading up to it. That could be an excuse, but as a backup quarterback, you've got to be ready for everything. Another unanswerable question, Tony. Mason pulls off that game and wins that game against Detroit. What happens? Is he appreciated a little bit more as a backup quarterback?
I don't think so. I think people had already made their minds up about him before Detroit. And, if Deontay doesn't fumble, if Pat Freiermuth doesn't fumble at the very end, maybe it's a different outcome and they win. But just based on his performance as a whole in that game, he didn't really do a whole lot to change any minds. And, I've said this many times, it's such a weird thing with a young backup quarterback, because they really don't get much of a chance to develop because they're always on the bench, so when they come in, they're expected, they have to rise up right to the challenge right away. And if they don't, then, when people make their minds up on these guys, that their opinions harden pretty quick, and it's hard to change those. And he did have a full season, basically 10 games or whatever in 2019. But as we talked about back then, I mean, they really didn't tailor they kind of went out of their way to play it safe with him instead of really letting him cut it loose, even though he was a young guy. He was only in his second year, so he was essentially a rookie. He didn't play at all the previous year. So I don't think it would have mattered. I think this is going to be the life of the relationship between Steelers fans and quarterbacks over the next however many years until they find the next one. I'm sorry, Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett, but this could be you in the near future. It's just how it is. I mean, we focus on the quarterback, and I'm no different than anybody else. But if these guys don't come through, then they're going to be criticized, and a guy like Mason Rudolph is never going to be appreciated until he does something till he has that it moment. God bless him, Charlie Batch. For some reason, he was the only backup quarterback that was able to break the code and be a backup, and everybody loved him. Maybe because he was from here. He had a dog. Everybody knew about the dog, and he talked about the dog, so that helped. But he's the only one. I mean, everybody else, other than Ben, they eventually caught some strays, as they say, from the fans.
I'll give you one more that I thought had the appreciation of fans. It was Mike Tomczak. I think they gave him some appreciation as a backup quarterback. That might be revisionist history. I'm not back in time. I know he wasn't the guy they wanted starting in 2006. It was supposed to be Jim Miller. That didn't last long. They knew Cordell was behind them, but he took that team to an 11-5 record a 10-6 record and to the playoffs. But he probably wasn't the guy to lead the team, but I think they gave him a lot of respect as a backup quarterback. Shannon, I'll give you real quick on Mason.
Well, somebody mentioned it in the comments. The offense has always been built around Ben, and it's going to be anybody that's a backup behind a franchise quarterback. That's the case. So I don't want to judge the quarterback play or skill position play behind that offensive line, as we've talked about for the last 3 years, has been subpar. But the truth is, the preseason is pretty much the same for all these backup quarterbacks. One year he got beat out by Joshua Dobbs, outplayed. Last year it was Haskins. He's had opportunities to at least seize the number 2 position and give people confidence that he can be the guy when Ben left. And he's never been able to do that. I say his ceiling, he's Neil O'Donnell 2.0. I mean, on a really strong team with a great defense, strong running game, he can win games for you, but he's not going to be a franchise guy. So I believe that Trubisky is more talented, and I believe Pickett has more of an opportunity to be a franchise guy than Rudolph. So I don't know how much opportunity. I believe they're going to give him a chance, but he's going to have to show something quickly at camp and in the preseason that he's never showed before to be considered.
Now, don't get me wrong. I will be very disappointed if Mason Rudolph is a starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers ever at this point. I'm not looking for him to be one. And I'm just asking the question if he's appreciated. That's it. I mean, I'm not endorsing him. I'm not wearing my number 2 jersey. I don't have that's one of the few jerseys I don't have.
Go Team Mason.
Or like I said, our good friend Kyle Kreis calls him Mace. I think I've never heard anybody call Mace, and now he's become Mace, and now I called him Mace because I'm listening to that. So let's talk about one more guy here who is appreciated now, because it's a situation of don't know what you got until it's gone. And it's Tyson Alualu. We're thrilled to have him back. But how much was Tyson Alualu appreciated on that line between Stephon Tuitt and Cam Hayward over the years? When he goes out, you're like, wow, we really needed that guy. But Tyson, very good player for this team. And when he left for Jacksonville, the same thing. People realized that, oh, yeah, he had a good season last year, but he's older. But they were upset when he left. And when he came back, we were celebrated. We finally celebrated him. But we Cinderella'd him. We did not know what we had until it was gone as Steeler fans with Tyson. So I think that's a guy that you could look at. I think that could be a thing with a guy like, I'm not saying all of the guys we talked about on this list, but I think with a Terrell Edmonds, yeah, it definitely could be. Real quick, gentlemen, I'm going to give you guys each an opportunity to throw in a player from the past who you feel was who's very underappreciated on this team. Robert Cotting says Joe Gilliam, and I absolutely agree. He was just here at a different time, and he did not. And Bradshaw, who finally got it together, and once he got it together, there was nobody else. There wasn't Terry Hanratty anymore. There wasn't Joe Gilliam anymore. So I definitely understand that. I thought Joe Gilliam could have been a better quarterback in this league. Joe Gilliam might have been born too early. That could be. I always feel that about Cordell Stewart. I think if Cordell Stewart was playing in today's football, you would not be. I mean, he would probably be a much bigger player than a Lamar Jackson, and a lot of these players. So, gentlemen, I basically threw out 2 right there. Shannon, do you have an underappreciated player from the past?
Yeah, this is a guy that I always had so much respect for, was Randy Grossman. And the reason why, I don't know why, with all the talent on those teams, it seemed like, man, it was a key, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, and everybody's keying on these Hall of Fame receivers and Franco and Rocket. And it seemed like he's the guy that kept coming through in huge moments so many times. And you never hear nobody talk about him because, he wasn't a great athlete. He wasn't a big guy. He was, but man, was he reliable. And I've always appreciated those kind of guys because without Randy Grossman, they wouldn't have won maybe 2 of them Super Bowls, but definitely one of them because what a big playoffs he had that one year. And I'm trying to think. I think it was in 78.
He was huge in 78. Yeah, he really came up for that team. But they also, in 77, what do they do? Number 1 draft pick, Benny Cunningham.
Yeah.
Tony, I thought that was a good one from Shannon. Tony, what are your thoughts on yours?
This might surprise people based on what he accomplished here, but I'm bringing it up based on what he accomplished here, and that's Jason Gilden. When he was a steady, just a great outside linebacker here, and he's definitely part of that heritage that they have at the position. And when he left here, he was the all-time leader in sacks, but yet nobody ever talks about him. And you talk, obviously there's Ham, Lamb. I mean, both inside and outside linebacker. There's so many great ones that have come through here, but specifically outside linebacker, Ham, Lloyd, even Merriweather, of course, Harrison, Peasy, Porter, obviously
Did you say Lloyd and Green?
Lloyd and Green, yeah, all those guys. And Jason Gilden, he comes in. He was drafted, and then he became Green's replacement when Green left after the Super Bowl year in '95 when he left as a free agent. And he went on, meaning Gilden, he went on to be the all-time sack leader and for a Steeler organization with so many great defenses and defensive heroes over the years. That says something, and people just don't ever talk about the guy. So I think he's somebody who, because of what he accomplished here and for such a prestigious position relative to the team, the Steelers, I think Jason Gilden is definitely somebody who maybe should be celebrated a little bit more.
I could go on forever about this. I could throw a bunch of them out. Definitely John Kolb is a guy that I would bring up. I would actually, this would probably upset a lot of people. I would actually say Dwayne Washington. I thought Dwayne Washington was definitely one that I thought was definitely underappreciated here. Brian Brown brings up a really good one. Darren Perry, the interception artist, Darren Perry. Lake got all the love. Perry had all the picks. I love it. Robert Cotting's on fire. You could tell that Robert was loving the Steelers in the 70s. Frank Lewis. Woo. Yeah, I mean, Frank Lewis went to the Pro Bowl with Buffalo after he left Pittsburgh. But they picked up Swan, Stallworth, and they had another guy that I'm going to put on the most underappreciated team. And I know Tony's going to love it when I say this, because this is a guy that we love. There's 2 guys, Shannon, that if you know Tony and I, there's 2 guys that we talk about all the time from the 80s. And the one is going to be Frank Pollard.
Yes. I knew that one.
The other one, the big one, he goes to the USFL, almost gets 2,000 yards in a season. Jim Smith.
Yeah.
And Tony says that this team might win the Super Bowl in '84 if Jim Smith is on that team and not on the USFL.
It was such a prolific offense that year with Lips and Stallworth. You had Jim Smith in there. I mean, Mark Malone was actually pretty good that year, believe it or not, when he finally got stepped in there to be the starter for David Woodley. So yeah, that could have been one dynamic offense that rivaled the Dolphins. I know it sounds crazy to say, but yeah, I mean, he could have been a real difference maker for them.
Sherry Richards says Mike Wagner. Of course, he was lost in the shuffle. He had a lot of Pro Bowls to his name, but I'll bring up that Robert Cotting, Ernie Holmes, Dwight White. Of course, Mike O'Malley says L.C. Greenwood should be in the Hall of Fame. Yes, absolutely. George Teston brings up Rich Ehrenberg, Ouija Thompson, and of course, Craig Wolfley. Gotta love Wolf. But I really like Rich Ehrenberg too. He was something special. Guys, we could probably go on and on this. I'm going to bring up one last guy. When you're talking Dan Moore Jr., who do I compare Dan Moore Jr. to in the past? They have the same number. He was a later round draft pick, and he ended up playing a long time on this offensive line. Number 65, John Jackson.
Love John Jackson.
That was one of my guys too. Michael O'Malley says Bad has some mad knowledge. It's just from living and breathing this team for all these years. This is what impressed me. That's I knew these guys because I had football cards and they were my heroes back then. I had 53 heroes. I could tell you the name of the 12th round pick in 1984, Elton Veals, just because I can, because I just followed that team madly. George Teston says Terry Long as well, Brian Brown, Merrill Hodge. I love it. I love talking about the old guys, and we'll probably do some stuff like this the next couple of weeks as we're getting ready for camp. Gentlemen, it was a fantastic day. Thanks for the time, fellas. Get to your July 4th festivities. Please enjoy the rest of the day. Please be safe the rest of the day. Remember, fireworks, they can Jason Pierre-Paul you. They could take your hand off, and you don't want to do that. And I'm not saying that as a joke. It happened in Florida over the weekend. Somebody lost their hand with fireworks again. So be careful with that. Actually, I leave it to the professionals because I would be that guy. So with that being said, there's 3 things that you need to do. And the number one thing, especially on this day, is be safe, but also be true to yourself. Always be behind the steel curtain. And 4, remember why we celebrate Independence Day. I'm going to add that one for today. And you know what? I mean, Roddy Piper said it best. Just when you think you've got all the answers. And I believe he said, just when you think you've got all the answers, Tony Defeo.
We keep changing the questions.
Shannon White.
Woo!
That's all for us. BTSC Nation, we love you. Happy 4th of July. We will see you here next week. Blessings to you all. For Shannon, for Tony, it's Bad, and we're out.